Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. My guest today is Martin Nielsen, the founder and CEO of Mdundo, one of Africa's largest homegrown music streaming services targeting mobile users across the continent. Started in Kenya, Mdundo is now in several African markets, reaching over 40 million users. And more importantly, Mdundo is going through some fantastic changes and evolutions that are hopefully going to transform the business and make it even larger across the African continent. Karibu sana, Martin.
Asante.
So, Martin, you and I think, have known each other for over 10 years, I think through early days, but I want to go back to origins. Who's Martin? Where did he come from? How did he end up in Nairobi doing Dundo? Let's go back to origin and sort of how you got here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a random story. My first time in East Africa was actually in Uganda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I came here as a student. I was studying on university and came through for a summer program where I was working in some different schools in Uganda on entrepreneurship. So
Okay.
basically looking at how can I teach some of the things that I'm learning in business
Okay.
school in a bit
Okay.
more basic sense. And it was sort of a volunteer program, and I thought it made a little bit more sense to me than teaching many other things, because
Okay.
I already had a strong passion for business and for building businesses. And one of the things that hit me was the opportunities here and the energy. I thought there was an extremely exciting energy.
Mm-hmm.
There was a strong belief that things are gonna get better. There's a strong belief that the market is rapidly developing. People are getting online. People are getting access. Infrastructure was heavily being invested into, and so it sort of gave me some sort of bug, and I got pretty excited about the whole space. And so a year later, I came across a Dane who wanted to start an investment fund in East Africa called 88 Miles Per Hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still doing my bachelor degree, and I told him, like, if you have an opening, let me know. I'll be really keen to come down, and I really think it's an exciting market, and I'll be very happy to help whatever way I can help out.
This time you're still in Uganda.
This time I'm actually in London. I was back from my you can say volunteer program. And he said, yeah, actually, if everything works out, he's going to run another accelerator, and he needs some hands on deck. He does see that, okay, someone who can help do some business modeling, someone who can help do some pitch decks, someone who can talk to the customers and get the first hires involved. And so I told him, yeah, I'll be happy to come down. And the idea was that I was to be here for 9 months, working with him, working at 88 miles per hour, help the companies that were in the accelerator program with their first sale, their first capital raise. Yeah, and that's kind of how I ended up here.
Yeah, so in 88 miles per hour, so your role is kind of like helping steer these startups, preparing them, presumably making them investable as well. But somewhere there, something happened.
Yeah, to actually, it happened really early, and I can't even take credit for the idea. As soon as I landed, after a couple of weeks, my manager came to me, a chap called Nikolai, and he was saying, we've had this idea around the music industry, and we think there's something there. Do you mind spending some time on it? We haven't seen any companies to invest in the space, but there must be something around it. And so I digged a bit into it, and the whole thesis was that the way the music industry was at the time, first of all, artists weren't really making any royalties from anything. The only really way that they did make some sort of royalties was that there was Skiza tunes.
Yeah.
And what seemed to be, for us to be the issue, was the artists didn't really seem satisfied with their revenue share, which I think has changed a lot since then.
Okay.
But also the user experience didn't seem so good to me. Like I was like, well, how do you listen to the music yourself? How do you actually consume music? And it seemed to us to be a bit of a strange dynamic, because at the same time, everywhere you walk across Nairobi, you'll hear music. Everyone is consuming music in one way or another, on their phone, on their laptops, in their cars. Like, so why was it so difficult to find a model that would sort of satisfy the user, satisfy the artists, and at the time, this is now 2012 when I arrived. Spotify was starting to grow quite
take
rapidly.
off, yeah.
It was still not the obvious success that it is today. There was actually a lot of debt in the company, a lot of questions. Can they make it through? Can they build a sustainable business around giving music away for free? So it was still not an obvious success. But what they had succeeded with was getting people from the illegal platforms into a legal platform. And so our thesis was, can we make a similar service that helps people moving people from the illegal sites into the legal sites? And the initial idea was to sell music on scratch card vouchers, the same that we used to use for airtime. Well, I guess they're still around, but most people pay directly from M-Pesa nowadays. But it was obviously a huge deal. And we were saying, well, how it would work is it would work more like an iTunes platform. You buy the scratch card. The idea was you buy it for 100 shillings. It has 5 songs on it. You scratch it. You put the code into your phone, and then you get to download those 5 songs. And we would then make specific cards for specific artists. And that would allow the artists to go around and sell their own cards and then generate some cash themselves.
Okay.
That would then be a user acquisition channel for us. So we would say to the artists, keep whatever you sell them for. That's a user acquisition channel for us. And we can then upsell using M-Pesa. And that's when then the revenue share will kick in.
I see. Okay.
So that you can basically help us get people into a legal platform. And we will then continuously monetize those customers and share back to you when they purchase your music.
So you actually executed that model?
We executed it. I think we had 35, 38 artists in the end who had their scratch cards. The way it came about was we didn't have any funding in the business. And what Nikolai told me was, can you validate it without spending any money? So we have a CTO at 88 miles per hour. He can help you build an MVP. But if whatever else we need, let's see if we can find a customer who's willing to pay for it. And so me, Nikolai, and then the Kenyan musician Frasha, he was a part of the sort of founding team as well.
Okay.
And he knew a marketing director at Airtel. That was Frasha who knew him. And called him up and said, okay, there's this new music thing I'm involved in. Can we come and chat with you? And so we went to meet Airtel on Mombasa Road. And I was not the one doing the talking, so I can't take much credit from this. But it was basically me, Nikolai, my boss at the time, and Frasha. And Nikolai was saying, was basically telling this Airtel marketing director that we're building this music service. We're putting these scratch cards into the market.
Yeah.
Airtel has an opportunity of all the scratch card having Airtel branding on the past.
Oh.
And I think he had a price to it. And I remember the meeting going down the lines of the marketing director saying, we're not going to pay that amount, but we can see if we can cover the costs with our own production supply chain.
Okay.
We will sort you out. We'll make sure you get the scratch cards. We'll put our branding on the back. Is that something we can do?
So instead of buying
instead of paying us, basically, they gave us the scratch cards.
Yeah.
And so, that's how we came about. And that helped us off the ground without really spending anything.
Wow.
In the very early days. And it gives us some validation that we were onto something.
Okay. So that scratch card model, I presume, took off. It started to grow.
Yeah, I would like to assume the same, but not really. So it did to some extent. It generated a lot of PR, and that also has value.
Yeah.
But the challenges really were more than the fit. So major challenge was it turned out that it's very difficult to do different scratch cards for different artists. The batch sizes were huge. So an artist would get like 5,000 scratch cards, which was like, okay, how am I going to go about
distributing this?
And of course, the cost is still the worth of 5,000 cards. We would have so the logistic part of it was quite challenging. And then on the sort of customer side, we realized quite quickly that many of the artists were giving away the scratch cards for free. So they weren't actually getting that monetary value that we were assuming. And that meant that when the customer came to the site, they weren't expecting to pay for it. They were expecting the music to be free of charge. And so it did, to a certain extent, kick off. We managed to get quite sizable volumes, but it never really took off the way we were planning to. And it was too difficult to scale. and it didn't really generate the monetary value that we were hoping it would generate for the
Yeah.
artist. But within the first 9 months or so, we had the interest from Airtel. Then we had Samsung contacting us and saying they
Oh.
were interested in doing something with. They were launching a Galaxy Music in 2013, I think. And then we had Microsoft for Africa had an initiative, and they wanted to do something with a music service for Africa within their ecosystem.
Correct.
So after 9 months, we had managed to get a bit of money from these partners and not so much from the consumers. And we were like, maybe we are trying to get the wrong people to pay for this for the party. Maybe we are better off making it a freemium version, let people consume the content, and then continuously grow this relationship with the potential sponsors or corporate partners who wants to be a part of our journey.
Great. So now, at what point do you sort of get to the model, which I think you've been known for a while now, which is you can download the music, it's got some advertising in it, and that's how kind of you're able to distribute it to many consumers?
Yes, I think we pivoted it within a year or so.
Uh-huh.
And again, not a super easy task. So I remember being quite annoyed at the brilliant guys at 88 miles per hour at the time, but I think turned out to be a very good lesson learned because our company sort of came as an in-house project because I was working for them and we sort of span it out. I had to follow all the sort of both good but also annoying startup rules. And one of them is that you need to validate before you start building or before you start spending. So even when I wanted to pivot, I said, we have this going on for us. I want to start selling advertising. They said, okay, fine, but we're not going to build anything until you have a sale. And that sale has to be at least $10,000 because if you can't sell $10,000, there's no validation. And then we're going to spend money that we don't have to build something for a market that we haven't validated. And I remember being quite frustrated about it, but I was like, okay, fair enough. I guess I have to do what I have to do. So I put a simple pitch deck together for a ad solution that technically didn't exist, and then started knocking on doors. And after let me not make it worse than it was. I think after 2-3 months, I came across a contact of someone who was a central part in putting together a Coke studio in Africa. And I had a meeting with her. And I remember her being very busy on the phone saying, you can pass by Saturday. She worked for Coke. Her name is Videra.
I know Videra, yeah.
And yeah, so I came to her office, had never met her before. Oh, actually, that's not true. I came to the production site, which was at Super Sports Studios, Mnet Studios, and sat in a small room. She came in and said, okay, what do you got? Pitched this idea to her. She was thinking about it, and she's like, let me just check with the agency if we have more media budget. But I like what you're doing, and I like doing new things with my budget. And so within half an hour or so, she had cleared it with the agency, and she told me we got a deal. We're gonna figure it out. And I went straight home from that. I remember buying probably the cheapest bottle of sparkling wine they had in the supermarket, and thinking now we're in business.
Fantastic.
And yeah, we were off the ground.
That's incredible. So you went in there, you didn't know what was going to happen. You coke out, and you have a signed deal.
Yeah.
Amazing for $10,000.
For $10,000, yeah, it's probably like unfortunate that we've reached a lot of milestones over the years, but that is one of the clearest in my memory and one of the most exciting ones because that took us from nothing to something.
So with this advertising model, basically, then the content that people will be able to download would be co-sponsored by Coca-Cola because of Coke Studio, right?
Yeah. So we would then what we did was we turned the service free of charge. And then we put the ads. In the beginning, there was banner ads, display ads. And then we developed the service over the years. So it also became audio ads. You could have 10-second ad before you hear the song.
Okay, like a pre-roll.
Yeah, the pre-rolls. And I think that's also something that we've been known for some people for the better, and for other people for the annoyance of having to hear our 10-second pre-roll. But the music is free. And so I think actually as Mdundo itself, it was quite a side effect was that actually our service grew a lot because people would download a song from our site and it would have the download free music from Mdundo in the beginning. And I've heard stories of it being played at funerals and weddings.
And you could hear
where people played from the beginning. Yeah. So it actually had a huge marketing effect, I think, for us and for us as a brand.
At this point, how are you dealing with the issue of the actual content and the licensing? Have you signed deals with the artists? How are you doing it at that point?
Yeah, when we started out, I didn't know it would be such a big task.
Uh-huh.
We basically did a bit of research online, and I think that's a very, very difficult thing to do when you want to start businesses anywhere in Africa, because there's not a lot of information out there.
I know it should be
I
done.
mean, if there's a lot more now than there was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The picture is still not always intact. And we came across a few record labels, and I realized, okay, the way you build a music service is you talk to a record label, and they give you the content. And then what we realized is that a lot of the record labels, they actually don't have the content that people wanted to listen to. A lot of the artists in Africa were independent artists. They were working by themselves. They owned their own rights. They had their own music. And so we had to start making individual contracts with individual artists.
Wow.
And in the beginning, it was paper contract, and we probably had a few hundred of those.
Wow.
But then we realized, okay, we can do it online the same way that YouTube is doing it. And that basically means you upload your content, you tick a box, you give consent to distribution of your music on the service, and that would basically work as a way to get artists to aggregate catalog for artists at scale.
So this is interesting. So what you're saying is that you literally went almost like hand-to-hand combat, one by one.
Yeah. I traveled Nairobi properly back then. Like, you would have to go everywhere.
And it's just in Nairobi at that point.
In the beginning, it was just Nairobi. So all ends of Nairobi, get into a taxi or get on the back on a Buddha, find the record labels, which were often in South Sea or in Dunholm or in areas that I wasn't too familiar with, and then find out, okay, this is where the studio is. Talk to the guys, tell them what we're trying to do, and it was probably the sort of proper way to get to know Nairobi and understand, okay, where's the music actually coming from.
So at this point, I imagine, so this is a pivotal point. You now have this ad-supported model. You're scaling up with customers, presumably, rather advertisers now are coming in. How are you sort of dealing with the fact that you need to bring visibility to brands and then you need to acquire a customer base?
Yeah.
How are you actually growing the user base at that point?
Yeah, the challenging thing with building anything that's platform is that you basically, in our case, have 3 different sites. In most cases, at least 2. We had 3, which is we need to get customers happy with the service we have. We need to get artists happy, and we make sure the advertisers who are paying for the party are also happy. And that is definitely a challenging sort of dynamic, because you can't, like, sort of the logic would say that without the music you can't get the users, and without the users you can't get the advertisers. There's an element of truth in that dynamic, but we also found that sometimes it goes the other way around. When the brand comes in, then the artists come, or when the users come, then the artists want to be a part of it. So the dynamic is sort of a cycle. And the first loop, you can say, takes maybe a year, and then the next loop takes a quarter, and then the next loop takes a month, and then the next loop takes a week, and then it starts being on a daily basis, right? Because you need to do the full rounds, and then you get a little bit more content, few more users, bit more ad revenue. Then now you can get a little bit more artists, because now there's more ad revenue, then a little bit more. So it's sort of a stepping stone,
compounding kind of.
Yeah, and I remember this sort of feeling of, if everyone could just jump at once, that would be so easy, but that's not how it works.
So at this point, how when it comes to acquiring the customers, are you running ads? How are you building up the user base?
In the beginning, it was 100% organic. So we didn't really do any paid ads. We didn't really have the funding for it, and we were primarily focusing on a model that was where we were acquiring users from Google search. And the idea basically of our acquisition engine, and up until today is the same, is that if we have the catalog that people are looking for, when they go to Google search, they will find us.
Of course.
And so that was basically the acquisition model. And we found that Google search was full of illegal links. And many of the illegal links were actually not very good websites. So it didn't take a lot to beat them. The biggest competitive advantage that the illegal sites would have is they would never miss a song. Whereas we, as a legal service, we might be late to the game because we had to clear the rights. We had to ensure that we have the rights for the music. Yeah, but beating them on the technology part, on the SEO part, was not difficult. But unfortunately, Google's algorithms do favor speed of content, the first one to have the music, the first one to have
Uh,
that. And often the illegal sites were competing with us on that. But over the years, we started getting top 10, top 5, and that's kind of where the traffic would come from.
okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that this business essentially grew very organically.
Yeah.
Minimum spend on marketing and customer acquisition.
Yeah.
Presumably word of mouth is getting out there. Musicians are talking to people.
Yeah.
And you start gathering this momentum. So I'm guessing at this point, this is probably what, 2014, 2015, maybe?
Yeah. Something around there, 2014.
So I'm curious about understanding what happens between 2015, 2014, maybe up till about, shall we say, COVID. That gap there, that 5 years or so, give or take. What's happening there? What's going on?
Yeah, it's depending on who you are, it's probably the most uninteresting, but also the most interesting part, because over those kind of years, we managed to get it more right, I would say. So what was really working in 2014 and 2015 was we had a lot of traction on the user side. We had a lot of interest from the licensing and like getting music on board and getting traction on that. We did have our occasional commercial partnerships, other partnerships coming on board, but properly scaling the monetization of the business was difficult. So for some years, it was sort of, you can say, 3 steps ahead, 1 step back, 3 steps ahead, 1 step back, and sort of finding out what is the best commercial model for this. Because as much as it was scaling and it was growing, it was not going at the same speed as the users and the artists. And so I think the traction we had on the users and the artists, combined with keeping an extremely low cost base. So we were very financially aware that we can't just spend just because we're seeing traction on these metrics. We need to talk about the money. And so these years were a lot of grinding to figure out, how do we get the commercial part right?
So in this case, you're still sort of finding your model. You're still figuring out how to find that break even, that consistent revenue. And more importantly, covering your costs. But it sounds to me that you're sort of still bootstrapping a lot. You're keeping it very efficient, lean and mean.
Very much.
As a business, right?
Very much. And it's for anyone who is looking at starting a business, those years take a lot longer than you plan for.
But they say patience is the thing, because I think there's been this notion around startups growing fast and big and getting funding to blast into ads. What I'm hearing here is kind of a story that resonates with me, because also as an entrepreneur, I've always been organic. You know, I always work on revenue as opposed to funding. So it almost sounds like a similar story in your case.
That was very much the case. That was very much the case. And we were very conscious of not making that mistake, that we go out and invest or put a promise out there that we can deliver on. That was something that we were very, very aware of, and then still are today. Even if you get a bigger business, it's still devil is still in the detail. You still got to make sure that you don't end up going in the wrong direction. So that's definitely a very, very big part of our business today.
So at this point, we're still just in Kenya, or have we now gone regional?
Yeah, so we started seeing traction in Tanzania from early on, from maybe 2014, 2015.
Okay.
And I think it's because of the Swahili music. So we had a lot of catalog from King Kaka that really resonated, especially in the northern side of Tanzania with the Arusha. But in Arusha, there's a very big hip hop community as well. And I think they bonded over some of that music, and they found our music. And then the artists would also find our platform organically and start signing up. And as I said, we were very, very cost conscious. So at that time, it was in the beginning, try and like call people up. So we would operate Tanzania without anyone in the team have ever been to Tanzania. Because, no one had money for a flight ticket or even a bus ticket. So we were just like, okay, let's call people up, hook them up on WhatsApp, tell them what we're doing. And then we did have some team members that started going. So I remember going to Uganda once or twice by bus and sort of understand, is there a market here? Can we do something? And just sort of figure out, is there some way we can scale? And I think also it's exciting always to have that ambition and want to do something somewhere else. And we did start seeing some traction. And then in 2015, we got a business angel in who had some business in Tanzania and in Uganda. And that's when we then started going there a bit more physically. So we set up a very small office, 1-man, 2-man offices.
Mm-hmm.
And in Tanzania, in Uganda, we worked with some consultants who tried to grow that market as well. And then I think towards 2015, 2016, we really realized, okay, the importance of Nigerian catalog.
Oh,
And so we had a team member who'd been with us for some years, and I remember him coming and saying, I have to go to Nigeria. He was very, very passionate about music, very interested about it. And he was like, I really need to go to Nigeria. That's where everything is happening. That's where everything is.
Afrobeats
Yeah,
blowing
forget
up.
about this, like a Kenyan guy. And he came with this like very, very lean budget. Like he had found the cheapest flight tickets, the cheapest hotels, the cheapest everything. And he'd never been to Lagos before. It's like, just give me this and I'll go. Give me a hard drive and I'll come back with some contracts and some music. And I was like, okay, fine, let's do it. So he flew over there. I think he was there for 10 days, 2 weeks, hustling in the streets of Lagos. This Kenyan guy who'd, I think, had barely left East Africa ever in his life, and just trying to get some catalog in, came back with this stack of contracts and content, and said, "Okay, now we're in business. Let's start having some Nigerian catalog on the service."
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So literally, again, very efficient, very practical, not fancy, not crazy. I mean, just very pragmatic. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that was the means that were available. And I mean, I think there's two ways to look at it. Either it was crazy, like why would you try to build a business when you can't even generate that amount of cash? Why are you still waking up in the morning and going to work? But the other way is, as you're explaining it, passionate and excited, and just wanted to get things going. And interestingly, what happened was, when we then started getting Nigerian catalog on the site, now we started growing in Nigeria user numbers, because similarly to East Africa, they had the same issue. It was all pirated websites. So we would start appearing on Google search, and when people were searching for Ice Prince music or Emma
Davido,
Abaga's,
somebody.
then we would come up, and then that way we actually started growing our user base in Nigeria as years before any of us ever had the resources to go over there.
No, I'm loving this. In the back of my mind, I thought when you open in Nigeria, maybe you did the whole, let's open an office, let's set up things on the ground, we've got an investor. But what I'm hearing is it sounds very, again, very efficient and lean. So you go to Nigeria, so presumably you're already in Tanzania now. And of course, there's a pivotal moment here that I want to talk about, which is, getting listed, right?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing now maybe from that period of 2015 going to 2020, which is, I believe, when you got listed. What's happening then? What's happening to the business? What's going on?
So the listing was a really, really exciting time for us. We had gone through a couple of years where we started seeing real good traction on the user side. I think we'd grown, if I'm not mistaken, to about 1.8 million users
On a Pan-African basis.
Yeah, monthly active users. We had, I think it's from 2018 to 2020. That's when we had seen that growth. Really, Nigeria picking up a lot. We had started seeing some interest from telecommunication partners in working with us, who had historically not been very keen to talk to us.
Okay.
They had, every time we had approached them, they'd been like, okay, either we need to get a very big part of the revenue, or they had their own offerings. So many of them had their own idea that they was to build a music offering. But we saw that finally there was some interest in saying, oh, why don't we just partner up with these guys? They seem to have figured something out.
Yeah.
And so we were seeing that traction. And then we were seeing licensing traction as well. We had done a licensing deal with Warner, and we saw interest from the other major labels in Africa. And so it seemed like a lot of things were actually moving quite good for us. And we were thinking, okay, how do we go about the next growth? And our chairman at the time, who was a very early business angel, he's still the chairman today, but also was a very early business angel in the business. He told me he's come across this guy in Denmark who advises companies who wants to list at Nasdaq First North. It's a stock exchange for growth companies. So basically, on this exchange, the startups or the growth companies don't have necessarily the same requirements as on the main markets. And the investors who are investing on this exchange is aware of that risk. that is there, that this is they're growth businesses. They're not Google
Established.
or Meta or whatever. It's a growth business. And it was Nasdaq had put it into the world to try and breach the gap between being a private business and a public business, and try and create, you can say, sort of commoditize angel investment a little bit more, because now you can easily look at different investments, and your decision is not as fixed as it normally is as an angel investor. If you an angel investor and you invest into a business, your investment is probably stuck there for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But this way, it would be a little bit more liquid. And I was really fascinated about what he was telling me, and I told him I don't know if it's something we can do. Like, is there even a market for it? We're not in Denmark. So Nasdaq First North is in Copenhagen, where I'm originally from, but I haven't been there based for, at that time, 8 years, and I don't really like, our business is not a Danish business. It's based here, and yeah. So I didn't really know much about it, and he said no, they actually think it can be done. They think there's an interest in the traction we have. They think that in Scandinavia there's an understanding of the music business because of the success of Spotify that came out of Sweden, and they think that in Scandinavia there's an understanding of impact and an interest in impact. And the combination of those three elements, me being Danish, growth in the music business out of Scandinavia, and interest in impact, that was kind of what they thought would be a good pitch to actually do the listing in Copenhagen.
And what are the motivations at this point to do the listing? Is it to raise more money, to invest? What are you doing this for?
Yeah, 100%. So for us as shareholders, it was about raising further growth capital. We weren't looking at it as an exit. We weren't looking at it as a way to sell out. We did lock-up agreements, so basically meaning we can't sell in the first year, I think, all of us. And well, I can only talk for myself. I haven't had an interest in selling anything either since then. So there was no monetary incentive at least for myself at that point. What there was that we raised about $6.5 million, which we then invested in growth capital, and has taken us from 2020 till today.
Wow. So again, probably the same attitude, being somewhat frugal or pragmatic with your money. And then the 6.5, obviously, did that also give the earlier investors an opportunity to sort of liquidate some of their input?
Yeah, it did. It did, of course. Yeah, so they could do that. New investors could come in, and old investors could exit. I think I don't have an overview of who did what and so on, but I think as an entrepreneurial reflection on the whole event, I would say that what I really got to learn at that point was that I had always felt until that point that whatever angel investment money I had taken in was a sort of debt. Like, I felt like I was in debt to them, and I had to get them their money back. And now when it was at this point, that removed pressure off my shoulders, because now it's up to them to decide if they want to get their money back or not.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was that I then started talking to some of them about this after, and I realized that first and foremost, none of them really saw it as a debt. They knew it was a lottery ticket that they were getting into in the first place. So they weren't really thinking of it that way. And then I also think many of the guys who've been a central part of the story, they were like, okay, if it can become this, what then more? Like, I don't want to sell anything, because
they're getting an early front seat.
Yeah, exactly. Why would
a rocket ship?
Yeah. Why would I want to sell out something that I entered at a small amount, and it could potentially be 10 times more because we've come to this point? So I actually don't think there was as much exchange of current shareholders, but as I said, it's more a reflection. I don't really have statistics to support that.
Okay. So you have this moment. You've managed to do this listing. Presumably now you have some good capex.
Yeah.
You can expand. You can invest in systems, people. And again, we're only talking about 4 years ago, right? So I'm curious to understand between then and now what has happened, because I think obviously I'm sure the listing process must have been quite rigorous. Must have been quite involving. I don't know whether you want to share what that was like.
Yeah, I can. I think the main thing is, it was an amazing process. It actually was a lot shorter than you might think. It took maybe from idea to execution less than 9 months.
Okay.
From when we actually maybe even 6 months and that was around the time where COVID was happening. So we were actually a little bit concerned about that. But that didn't end up playing a role anyway.
Yeah.
But it was the same year as COVID was happening. And the main part of the process was that you basically apply for it. So you write an application to NASDAQ. What happens is you don't just send a random application. You do actually have a meeting with them. They take you through the process. They tell you, okay, we think that this could be a good case, because the application is very, very, very extensive. So you don't want to start doing it unless they have tentatively said that they think it could be an interesting business. And so they told us they think it could be an interesting business. We started the application process. And I think the major thing as an entrepreneur here was that the application process for the stock exchange is written in a objective tone. And everything that we wrote in it is written as a objective piece of information, because the application is supposed to be as a single source of truth for investors and for NASDAQ. And what that means is, compared to the previous, where every time I was pitching, of course, there's still a single source of truth, but there's optimism, and you're pushing your own agenda. But here they'll be like, no, we want the full picture, because when you're on a stock market, addressing the risk is really important as much as addressing the upside, because you want the investor to know both. There's no that you want to show the full picture.
It's a balanced view.
Exactly, it's a balanced view on it. And so that took a long time for me to get into that. And the other thing is that you want to keep it very secret, because what happens is you want to make sure that you create as much noise as possible when you release it, so that you turn that interest into subscriptions, or basically investors.
Yes.
And so we kept it secret up until 2 weeks before the listing day. And within the team, I kept it secret until I think 6 weeks before. And COVID did me a favor there, because everyone was working from home. So it made it a lot easier for me to keep it
to be discreet.
I don't mind sharing it with the team, but I thought that it's very important that they don't get distracted by it, and that it's very important that they get as excited about it as I am, and not dragged into what's actually all this that's going on. And also, to be completely frank, there is a risk that your application is not successful, and you don't want to necessarily. That can also be backslashing on the team. That now we are back to where we were. And so we kept it till very late, and then we announced it to the team. A couple of weeks later, announced it to the world, you can say. And then you have a 2-week period to get the investors that you need. So basically, you announce the listing, and then we had 2 weeks to close the 6.4 million that we were looking for. And that you do through a roadshow. So we did a roadshow in Denmark, where the stock exchange is. We did different press, talked to different newspapers, to different TV stations, to some private banking. And then the advisor also have some access to some people who are shareholders in the other growth companies, and just see is there interest in this. And what was quite nerve-wracking about the process is you don't know, as the 2 weeks go ahead, how far you are, because they subscribe through their own bank, and all the different banks only send it to our central bank after the 2-week period is over. So you walk around sort of feeling your gut. Are you doing your best? Is it on track? Is it not? And then 2 weeks later, on the last Friday, it sounds like it's a movie, but the bank calls you up and they say, okay, you made it, or you didn't make it, or this is how much you raised.
Almost like a lottery.
Yeah, exactly. And like we raised double than what we had expected.
Wow.
So we had 111% oversubscription, meaning that a lot more of a commitment. It was fantastic, but you can't take the money. You have to you can only raise what you said you were going to raise.
Yes.
So basically how it works is you have to redistribute, and then you have some people will get their money back because there was just too many subscriptions.
Okay.
So we still raised the amount we were looking for. So everything is, of course, good. But we potentially could have raised double if we wanted to.
So I'm also curious at this point whether you've done the licensing with Warner Brothers and the likes. Is this already the case,
Yeah, it's
or
already the case.
you already had done now the formalities? And this
Yeah.
is probably the ribbon of the business in the sense that now you're working with proper global music distribution, right? It's no longer just these direct contracts you had on the ground, right?
Yeah, it carries a lot of weight. I think we have a Warner. We also work with Universal Music, and it carries a lot of weight. I think also the Nasdaq listing carries a lot more weight than I assume than I
They treat
expected
you
or
differently
assumed.
now.
Yeah, completely. And it's your numbers are now validated. If I say we have 34 million monthly active users, we do, because otherwise I'm going to prison. Because I'm telling my shareholders that we have.
Because you're publicly
Like
listed now.
they are investing based on that information. So our monthly active users, our revenues, our losses, everything is out there in the open. And of course, it also presents a potential risk that everyone knows everything about what we're doing. But to me, it was a very strong shoulder clap and a very strong boost that we can share this information with confidence, and that people will have to believe it because it's truth. And we already had a DNA in the company of being a very transparent company. I always saw that as a competitive advantage to be someone who's not holding my cards close. It's a natural trait of mine, and sometimes an advantage and sometimes as a disadvantage. But in this case, it was an advantage.
Yeah. I'm also curious to understand, because I think right now you're at the threshold of about 40 million actives, yeah?
34.
34 million monthly actives. So I'm curious about that trajectory, because I think somewhere there you told me you're about 5 or 6, and then
Yeah.
it's kind of like gone like 5-6 fold. What's driving that acceleration? What is it? Is it the model? How did you grow so fast and so big?
Yeah, so it's a model. So I think that we've been helped by a number of different factors. I think African music has blown up the last couple
There's
of
the
years,
appetite, yeah.
which definitely helps. Catalog is a major driver for us. We did raise some capital that allowed us to improve the product a bit, that allowed us to also invest heavier into SEO.
This is post listing, or
Yeah, after the listing. And so at the listing, the
That's
capital we raised at the
okay,
listing.
okay.
And then I think partnerships really helped us. So we have a strong partnership with Opera, which runs the Opera Mini browser,
Okay.
which is still a huge customer base across Africa. We did our partnership with Vodacom in Tanzania, which is the biggest telco in Tanzania. We've since then launched with MTN in Nigeria, MTN in Ghana, MTN in South Africa. We launched with Safaricom here in December 2023. So I think we've had a very strong partnership strategy, and that helps us grow in two ways. One way is a direct way, that the partner has some reach, like Opera has a reach, and the artists have some reach, and the catalog is popular, and the telcos have their reach. But also in a way that with the telcos, we created a paid service, and the paid service gave us a higher value per customer, which meant that for the first time ever, we could start justifying spending, because we actually could see that with an increased customer lifetime value that the paid service would give us, we could go out and run acquisition campaigns specifically for our paid service.
Knowing that this would be a recurrent income situation.
Exactly.
And I think you explained to me earlier that between the ad-supported model, which continues, you now have these paid users who I think are spending as little as 5 shillings a day to download unlimited music.
Yes. So basically, I think it's something we're extremely proud of. We have created a proposition to the telcos where we, together with them, put a product into the market. The customer subscribes for a daily or weekly rate. It depends a bit from market to market. We make it very affordable, but still fair for the right holders. And what the customer gets is access to DJ mixes. So we have a selection of DJ mixes that we release every single day, and it's all behind a payment wall. And you cannot access that content with or without ads unless you are a paid subscriber. And to us, that was the tricking point of what would make people willing to pay for music. And we found that DJ mixes was a format that ticked several boxes. It ticked the box that it's easy because it's a one download. So you download one mix. You don't have to stream. You don't have to use too much data.
It's a file on your phone.
It's data efficient. It doesn't take too much space on your phone either. It gives you exactly the music you like because the DJ has curated it. If you like gospel, and you download that gospel mix,
Ah,
you'll find all the gospel you like. And
okay.
for a customer who doesn't have much data, that's a huge advantage. And and it gave you all the trendy new songs. And so it meant that for the customer, paying 5 shillings to get a DJ mix would actually be cheaper than browsing around looking for the music I was looking
Ah,
for. So it's actually a trade-off for the customer that is very, very good. And the money, of course, contributes to both our business and to the artist business, whom's music is in the DJ mixes.
that's incredible. So you had these insights and then you created a product around that,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, you can make it sound like it was that easy.
No, but I know the pivot, the experimentation.
Yeah, it sort of just happened that we were like, okay, this is something we see a huge interest in,
Yeah.
and it's something that we really like putting into the market. And we still offer ad-free music if you're a paid customer, but it's not the driver. It's not the value proposition. The value proposition is that pay 5 shillings and we got your music needs. Download your reggae mix, download your Niger mix, download your Kalenjin. We have a lot of tribal music, Kalenjin, Kamba mix,
Oh, down
and then you're sorted.
to
And
the
then
colloquial and
exactly,
vernacular.
exactly, that gives you entertainment on your phone for the next 24 hours, and then come back and download another mix.
Fantastic. What about when we talk about where the business is now and the model? Because I'm hearing subscription, I'm hearing ad supported. When it comes to advertising, and I recently attended your Mdundo mixer here in Nairobi, um, how big is the advertising piece as part of how the business operates today? Is it still the main driver, or is it less of that and more subscription?
Yeah, there's been a huge change to our model. So when we listed the company in 2020, it was 100% advertising. Today, we are finishing our year in a month, the year 2023-24. And we are expecting more than 50% of our business to be ad subscription. And so there's been to be paid subscription. So there's been a huge shift from being practically nothing to now being the majority. And so we are seeing that paid is the majority of our revenue. And I mean, the main dynamic of that is that we have seen just a consistent year-on-year growth and interest with more and more telcos. So we keep adding partners that are seeing that we are actually delivering a strong telco product, and that's something that is really important to us to also emphasize on, because we've seen in the 10 years that we've been in the business, we've seen the number of music services that has come and gone with telcos
Mm.
across the markets. And I'm 100% sure that smart people have been working on it. They've been working night and day. They've been trying to figure out, how do we make all the ends meet? How do we drive a healthy business around music as a telco or with a telco? And it just hasn't been successful. And so for us, it puts a lot of pride that we can go out and say, actually, we've cracked something here, and we found a way that we can get people to pay for music, and in that way grow the music industry with the revenues that we generate.
Do you think it has something to do with the fact that, as opposed to doing what I'd call a carbon copy of a Spotify, or what was it before? Is it iTunes from
Hmm.
Apple,
Hmm.
and trying to create or build a business around the model? What it sounds to me is like, what has made you successful is the fact that you looked at the market, you looked at the customer, you started with the customer first.
Yeah.
What are his constraints? What are her constraints? The musician and so forth, and you built a product around, or proposition that was, for lack of a better word, maybe Africa relevant or market
Hmm.
relevant, as opposed to trying to, oh, that's Spotify there, let me copy that. Is that
Hmm.
partly, possibly why you might have been successful?
I think so, but it took a long time for us to realize that. So when you said, like, I think, of course, I wouldn't want to say we didn't look at the customer first, but
Mm,
I didn't properly listen. I think there was a time where I thought I was listening, and then there was a time where I
mm,
was actually listening, and there was years in between those 2 points.
wow.
I think when we really started properly listening was around 2016, 2017, and from 2012 to around that time, we were focusing on building a Spotify for Africa. That we would
Ah,
talk about it, we would address it. That's what we were building. What we realized around 2016, 2017 is, stop telling the customer how to consume music. Start observing how are they consuming music, and find out, can we be a part of that journey? Can we take over that journey? Can we be a part of that and provide a solution to that? And that is what started accelerating our growth.
Fantastic.
And that's when we started building a service that had download, that was web-based and not app-based. Like, we really had a strong focus on app, streaming, all those things that also, if you look at both AudioMac, Boomplay, many of the other offerings, that's Come and Gone, Spinlet, and so on.
Yeah,
They
I
tried to
remember
do
them.
that.
Yeah.
And we were too. We were all excited for people to all get smartphones and all get data and all get internet, and then we would be there waiting for them. But when we started saying, okay, wait, let's not do that. Let's ask and understand and observe, how are people consuming music? Let's offer a solution for that. And then we'll let Spotify's and Apple's and Boomplays and AudioMac do the streaming and the apps.
Whatever they want to do, exactly. Yeah. And I'm just curious, because I think we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation, but I think there's some key points I want to get out here that I think people really value. When you think about this journey, which is now, sounds to me like about 10 years, actually 12 years, what are some of the key takeaways that you would say you have seen along this journey? What are some of the learnings and the key insights that you might have? Maybe stuff that even other entrepreneurs might find valuable.
Yeah, I think there's a few for sure, and you probably get different ones depending on which day you catch me.
Yeah.
I think from a sort of challenges point of view, I would say that the biggest challenge you'll face as being an entrepreneur, especially in most of Africa, is the access and accuracy of data. I think it's underemphasized in most conversations how difficult that makes things. Because if you don't have accurate data, it makes it difficult to forecast, it makes it difficult to catch trends, it makes it difficult to understand how the market is moving. And without that data, you can both make good business decisions for yourself, but also attracting investors, attracting capital. A huge amount of the mistakes that has been made the last 12 years that I've been doing this is because of either basing it on no data or basing it, more importantly, on wrong data. There might be one PwC report you found, and that's the one that the whole thesis is built around. And like, nowhere else in the world would you build a whole business around one PwC report. And so I hope it's something that's going to change, and I hope that we're going to get more and more data out there. But we got to know, what is the actual purchasing power? How much does people have in their pocket? What do they spend their money on? How many people are actually online? What are actually going on? What are they doing? And I think a lot of that data you have to be very critical to it, and I am still today, to make better business decisions. And I think that's a huge challenge. In terms of some more, you can say, encouraging advisories, I would say, for me, it has been a huge benefit that I chose a business in an area that I'm passionate about. And I really would encourage any entrepreneur to really think twice about that, because we do see that entrepreneurs will jump from one trend to the next one. Now this is the new thing, agri-tech or fintech or whatever, edutech or whatever else it is. And you can probably get it right, but I think that for me, I would have stopped after 3 years, 4 years if I didn't enjoy it. I wouldn't have read a 200-page contract from Warner properly if I hadn't cared about getting music online. And you can say, okay, maybe if I started building a fintech, I would have raised a lot more than today. But chances are that 99% chance I would have gone bankrupt, because I would have never understood the business well enough, because I wouldn't have cared enough. And I think that it might be a vague advice, but I really would encourage that anyone who want to start a business or want to get involved in a business, ask yourself, is this something I'll find fun even when things are not good?
Yeah.
The other thing I would really encourage is a strong focus on few things. I for vast majority of when I've been doing Mdundo, I've never involved myself in anything else. I've sometimes been a little bit involved, but if someone wants my involvement and it requires more than an hour a month or an hour a year, I'll be like, I'm not your guy, because something else is my priority. And if I can come in and inspire some people, I'll be happy to do it, but just call me up. But I can't actively be a part of anything else than Mdundo, because that's what I'm building.
Wow. So laser focused, basically, obsessed.
I would really encourage focus, because I mean, it's hard enough to have a to run a one business. I don't know why you would want to get involved in more.
Like Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly. That guy is special.
Yeah.
Let's not compare ourselves with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the grass is always greener. There's no day where a small voice will say I should have done something else, or there's another opportunity out there, or you're missing the train on this, or now Spotify is launching. You did the wrong thing. You did the wrong thing. That voice will always be there. You have to learn how to deal with it, and then you have a sanity check and ask yourself: is that sensational? Are you just driven by a headline, or do you actually have evidence that there's
That's
something else
true.
going on?
Yeah, headline reading can get dangerous.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. I think there's just last two questions I think I'd like to ask. And the first one is, from your perspective, the future of music in Africa, maybe in Africa globally, what do you see happening? Because it sounds like me that you've kind of taken a slightly divergent route to what everyone thinks should be happening. The popular Spotify or Apple Music route. And then the second thing is, I think, the future of Mdundo.
Yeah.
You're here now. What happens next? I'd like to hear those two perspectives as you wrap up.
Right. So in terms of the future of African music, I think there's two really important points to me. Number one, African music and the success of it is only just beginning. So the last couple of years is not the peak, in my opinion. It's
even
the beginning.
piano and where does that challenge?
It's
Everyone is dancing.
just the beginning. It's just the beginning. It's, to me, very, very simple. Africans are getting online across all markets. When they get online, they get a voice. They get a voice on TikTok, they get a voice on YouTube, and they're going to consume content that they like. When they consume content that they like, a huge part of it is going to be African. We see on our market research, 50%, and that's including Kenyan, even though sometimes Kenya gets heat for not listening to their own music. At least 50% is Kenyan music, and that's the same for every other market in Africa. And at least 80% is African music, and that's across every market that we operate in. So a lot of the content that they're going to consume when they get online is going to be African. And what happens when 1.1 billion people gets online and starts consuming their own content is that it will feed the algorithms globally. And when it feeds the algorithms globally, African music will have the same impact as any other ad in the history of life. People are going to start saying, oh, this is actually not bad after 5, 6, 7 times. And then it's going to get much, much bigger than what it is today.
Wow.
There's no reason why a Billboard Top 100 is not 20% African music, 30% Asian music. I mean, it should follow the global population if everyone is listening to their own content. And today, I mean, I don't even think African music is 1%. So we are only at the beginning, and it's going to be really exciting for African music globally. And
then we have the fact that there's this young population, right?
Yeah, exactly. That it's the trend is your friend, and this trend is only going one way. And that is definitely the case. The second perspective I have on the future of African music is that I'm really excited to see that platforms like ourselves can start generating revenue on the continent. Because I think what we have seen in the last couple of years is a huge success of driving catalog and revenue from that catalog globally. And that investment is going back into the content. And that does mean that the popularity of the content is also growing locally, but the monetization of it has pretty much not grown. And that it has a big impact on the vernacular artists, on the hyper-local artists who might not have that global appeal or want that global appeal. And to me, that's a really important audience. And that's the audience that we focus on as Mdundo, that, listen, we have a Hausa version of our site, which is a tribe in the northern Nigeria. There's 80 million Hausa.
Wow.
And that's the biggest tribe in Africa. It's huge. And if you look at the different tribes across Africa, the different languages, they are nations in themselves. They have their own culture. They have their own language. They have their own stories that they're telling through their music. And there's no reason why that artist who's singing in Kamba can't be getting the same traction and popularity than Burna Boy is, but within his own community. And that has to start getting monetized, in my opinion. And that's the problem that we are trying to solve. And we see a willingness to buy for that audience. They want to listen to their own music. And we also see a willingness for advertisers to want to reach that audience in a personal, in a direct way, where you're saying, okay, I understand you, I hear you. This is the content you care about. Let us be associated and deliver our advertising messages together with that.
There's so many ways that mimics what we see with Royal Media Services in Kenya, where I think they have over 20 vernacular stations.
Yeah.
And that apparently is the 80% of their revenue.
Exactly.
That when you go into vernacular or colloquial content that is uniquely identified by a certain community, then there's much more intent, much more interest. And even for advertisers, they can be much more targeted because they know these are the nuances of that audience. And in fact, it's so funny. The other day, I was on a trip when we went to Konza to see the Technopolis. And one of the people in our trip was saying that, within the real estate space that she operates, when they target, let's say, radio stations that speak to the Kikuyu tribe, which are renowned for being very much into real estate investments, they see a very high conversion rate when they advertise on those vernacular stations.
Yeah.
Because it's very much part and parcel of their culture, buying and investing in land. So it sounds a little bit like that to me with the Hausa.
100%.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what it is. And I think it's that real local relevance is absolutely key. And you asked what we see the future of Mdundo as well. And I mean, on the metric, our key metric right now is profitability. So we are still not a profitable business. We've moved significant towards it in the last couple of years. And we have a goal of being profitable in 2025.
Okay.
So that's the key thing. And to me, it means something in more than one level. I think it's important that we have built a music business in Africa for Africa that is financially sustainable. Because what we have seen in the past is big investments into the space and then come and gone. And that metric for me is very, very key. And I don't see a reason why, considering the penetration of the product, music, everyone is listening to music. Yeah. There's no reason why that shouldn't be the case with our platform. So that's the metric we're looking at in the future. The focus is 100% local relevance. So how we are building that service and building that profitability is through local relevance. How are you consuming music? What music do you want to listen to? What content do you want to listen to? Which devices are you using? And understanding that and contextualizing it, that's 100% our strategic focus to get to that target.
Great, man. Thanks so much, Martin. This has been an excellent conversation. I think you've given me more than I expected, but I think I have a complete or much better understanding of the business and why it's growing and where you're going. And I think I'm loving the way that you've pointed out that really it's about going local, pairing up the fact that, there's this untapped opportunity right now. And again, from using insight and data, you kind of have really understood what is happening on the ground. And more importantly, that there is this big opportunity potentially that you can tap into.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being here and joining us for this conversation, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
In the future of Mdundo and the future of African music.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So there you have it. Martin's given us an incredible insight into his business, Mdundo, growing like gangbangers. These guys are taking over the market in Africa. And more importantly, I think there are lessons in what he shared around entrepreneurship, what it takes, sort of like pushing forward, going through the tough times, trying different things, but ultimately building something that's sustainable and hopefully in the next year or so, also profitable. We'll catch you in the next one.